What happens when a pregnant wife discovers her billionaire husband's ultimate betrayal? She doesn't just cry. She gets even. While Julian Blackwood was enjoying a secret weekend with his mistress in a lavish Manhattan penthouse he bought for her, he had no idea his wife Isabella was changing the locks. But she wasn't just kicking him out. She was moving someone else in. This is the story of how a woman scorned didn't just burn down her husband's secret world, she put it up for rent with him still inside. Stay tuned for a story of epic revenge. The air in the Blackwoods' Upper East Side brownstone was always perfectly climate-controlled, a crisp 72 degrees that smelled faintly of white gardenias and old money. To the outside world, and to most of the glossy magazines that featured them, Julian and Isabella Blackwood were the city's golden couple. He, the formidable heir to the Blackwood shipping fortune, with a jawline that could cut glass and a reputation in finance that was both feared and revered. She, the statuesque daughter of a diplomat whose grace and intelligence were the perfect complement to his ambition. Now, at 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son, they'd been told Isabella was supposed to be the picture of fulfilled bliss. Tonight was the annual Foundation Gala for the Children's Literacy Society, an event Isabella had chaired for the last 3 years. She stood before the full-length antique mirror in their dressing room, a hand resting protectively on the gentle swell of her belly. The custom-made navy silk gown flowed over her figure, elegant and demure. Diamonds, a push present given to her months early by Julian, glittered at her throat. She looked the part. She just didn't feel it. For months, a subtle chill had been seeping into the warmth of their marriage. It was nothing she could pinpoint, nothing she could accuse him of, without sounding like a hysterical hormonal wife. It was in the way Julian angled his phone away from her when a text came through. It was in the increasing number of late nights at the office that left his suit smelling not of stale office air, but of something fresh and floral, and distinctly not her perfume. It was in the silences that stretched between them during dinner silences that used to be comfortable, but were now laden with unspoken words. "Ready, darling?" Julian's voice, smooth as single malt scotch, came from the doorway. He looked impeccable in a Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly coiffed. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Those cool gray eyes had been distant for so long. "Almost," she said, turning to him and forcing a radiant smile. "Just feeling our son do a little dance." She took his hand and placed it on her belly. He held it there for a beat, his expression unreadable. "He's got his mother's energy," Julian said, his hand retreating far too quickly. "We should go. Can't be late for our own party." The gala was a sea of flashing camera bulbs, champagne flutes, and superficial air kisses. Isabella moved through the crowd with practiced ease, a queen in her court. She accepted compliments on her glow, answered questions about the nursery, and laughed at the jokes of city councilmen. Julian was by her side, his hand a proprietary weight on the small of her back. They were a perfect tableau of power and happiness. It was during the silent auction that her best friend Chloe found her near the dessert table. Chloe, a sharp-witted art gallery owner with eyes that missed nothing, took one look at Isabella's face and dispensed with the pleasantries. "You look like you're about to shatter into a million tiny pieces," Chloe whispered, guiding her to a slightly more secluded alcove. "Don't give me the 'I'm just tired' speech. What's he done now?" Isabella felt the carefully constructed dam within her begin to crack. "It's nothing, Chloe. I'm just pregnant." "Bullshit," Chloe said, not unkindly. "You're glowing on the outside and screaming on the inside. I saw him earlier by the bar. He was on his phone, and he had that same look he gets when he's closing a hostile takeover. Predatory, secretive, except he wasn't looking at stock tickers. He was smiling. The words sent a fresh spike of ice through Isabella's veins. She knew that look. It was the look he used to give her. "He's just busy." Isabella insisted the lie, tasting like ash in her mouth. The merger with the Japanese firm is in its final stages. Chloe just raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. A merger that requires him to smell like Chanel No. 5, an interesting business strategy. The barb hit its mark. Isabella had smelled it on his collar just last week, a ghost of a scent she had scrubbed away with a vengeance before their housekeeper could find it. She had told herself it was from a hug with a female colleague, a plausible excuse in their world of social niceties. But hearing Chloe voice a similar suspicion made the self-deception crumble. Later that night, as their town car purred through the quiet streets, Julian was once again absorbed in his phone. The screen's blue light cast ghoulish shadows on his face. Isabella watched him, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. The baby kicked a sharp, insistent thump against her ribs, as if he too could sense the chasm opening between his parents. "Julian," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk." He didn't look up. "Can it wait, Izzy? I'm just finalizing some details for the Tokyo call." "No, it can't." She waited until he finally reluctantly locked his phone and turned to her, his face a mask of weary patience. "Are you happy, Julian?" He blinked, thrown by the directness of the question. "Of course I'm happy. We have everything. A beautiful home, a child on the way." "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "Because I'm not. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. You're distant, you're secretive, and I'm tired of pretending I don't notice." He sighed, the sound a mixture of exasperation and condescension. "Isabella, you're emotional. It's the pregnancy. Every little thing feels like a catastrophe. I'm under immense pressure at work, and I come home to accusations." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment she almost believed him. She almost apologized. But then she saw a tiny smudge of crimson lipstick on the white cuff of his shirt, almost hidden by the cufflink. It wasn't her shade. She hadn't worn red lipstick in years. In that instant, suspicion hardened into a sickening certainty. The room seemed to tilt, the scent of gardenias suddenly cloying and suffocating. She said nothing. She simply turned her head and stared out the window at the blurred lights of the city, a city that suddenly felt cold and alien. When they got home, Julian went straight to his study, closing the door firmly behind him. Isabella walked through the silent, cavernous house, her hand once again on her belly. This house, which once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a gilded cage. Driven by an impulse she didn't fully understand, she went to Julian's dressing room. Her hands shook as she went through the pockets of the tuxedo jacket he had tossed carelessly onto a valet chair. Nothing. Then she checked his briefcase, the one he always kept locked. Tonight, in his haste, he had forgotten. The latch clicked open. Inside, beneath a stack of financial reports, was a small, velvet-covered jeweler's box, not from Tiffany's or any of their usual haunts. It was from a chic, modern designer she vaguely recognized from a fashion magazine. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Was it for her surprise to make up for his distance? She lifted the lid. It wasn't a necklace or earrings. It was a single, heavy, ornate key. Attached to it was a small leather fob embossed with the logo of a brand new ultra-exclusive condominium building in Tribeca, the Argent. And beneath the key, a single receipt. It was from a high-end furniture store, a place known for its sleek, minimalist designs, totally at odds with their classic, traditional taste. The total was staggering, over $200,000. The purchase had been made 2 months ago. Isabella sank onto the ottoman, the key cold and heavy in her palm. It wasn't a surprise for her. It wasn't for the baby. It was for a different life, a secret life he was building without her. The chill she had been feeling for months now had a name. It was betrayal, and it was colder and sharper than she could have ever imagined. The tears she had been holding back for so long finally fell silent and hot on her cheeks, but as she sat there in the opulent silence of her perfect life, a new feeling began to smolder beneath the hurt, a cold, hard, and utterly ferocious rage. The next morning, Isabella woke with a clarity that was as terrifying as it was empowering. The tears of the previous night had washed away the fog of denial, leaving behind the jagged landscape of the truth. Julian was having an affair. He hadn't just found a lover, he had built her a nest, a $200,000 nest furnished with a life that didn't include Isabella or their unborn son. She went through the motions of their morning routine with the precision of an automaton. She drank her decaf tea, ate her toast, and smiled blandly when Julian, looking refreshed and utterly guiltless, kissed her cheek before leaving for the office. "Big day," he'd said. "Don't wait up." The moment the front door clicked shut, Isabella's facade crumbled. She pulled out the key from its hiding place. The Argent. She Googled it. The building was the epitome of new money luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows, a private spa, a rooftop infinity pool, and most importantly, a reputation for ironclad discretion for its high-profile residents. It was the perfect place to hide a secret. Her first instinct was to drive down there, use the key, and confront whatever she found. But her second, more rational thought, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Chloe, stopped her. A hysterical pregnant wife breaking into a love nest was a scene that would only end in her humiliation. Julian would twist it, call her crazy, use her hormones against her. No, if she was going to play this game, she had to play it on his level. It wasn't just about emotion anymore. It was about strategy. She called the one person she knew she could trust to be both discreet and ruthless. "Chloe." "I need a name," Isabella said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "The best private investigator in New York. Someone who handles high net worth divorces. Someone who can find everything and leave no trace." Chloe didn't ask questions. She simply said, "I know a man. Arthur Harding, ex-NYPD old school. Looks like a bulldog, thinks like a viper. I'll send you his number. Be careful, Izzy." Arthur Harding's office was in a nondescript building in a less fashionable part of Midtown. The man himself was exactly as Chloe had described, short, stout, with a face that looked like it had been carved from a block of granite. He listened to Isabella's story without interruption, his gaze sharp and intelligent. She gave him the key. "The Argent, huh?" Harding grunted, turning the key over in his thick fingers. "Smart. Biometric elevators 24/7, concierge that's paid to be blind. But everyone leaves a digital trail." He looked at her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "You're sure you want to pull on this thread, Mrs. Blackwood? Sometimes what you find at the end of it is uglier than you can imagine." "I'm pregnant, Mr. Harding," Isabella said, her voice steely. "My imagination is already running wild. I need facts. I need to know who she is, how long it's been going on, and every single detail about that apartment." I want to know what he paid for it, how he paid for it, and whose name is on the deed. I want to know everything." Harding gave a curt nod. "It'll cost you." "My husband is worth 9 figures, Mr. Harding," Isabella replied coolly. "Find me the truth, and I'll make sure you're well compensated." The next week was a special kind of hell. Isabella lived in a state of suspended animation, playing the part of the devoted, expectant mother while a storm raged inside her. She attended her prenatal yoga classes, met with designers for the nursery, and smiled through dinners with friends, all the while waiting for Harding's call. Julian continued his routine of late nights and feigned affection, oblivious to the net that was slowly closing around him. He'd occasionally ask if she was feeling all right, noting her pensive mood. She would blame it on the baby, a convenient excuse that was both a lie and the deepest truth. She was doing all of this for the baby. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. "I have something for you," Harding said, his voice grim. "My office, in an hour." Isabella's hands were trembling as she sat across from him again. He slid a thick manila envelope across his desk. "It's all in there," he said. With a deep breath, she opened it. The first things she saw were photographs, glossy, high-resolution images that felt like a physical blow. There was Julian laughing as he entered the Argent, his arm slung casually around a young woman. A woman with long, chestnut hair, a lithe figure, and a wide, dazzling smile. She was beautiful, and she couldn't have been more than 25. More photos. Julian and the woman, her on the balcony of a penthouse apartment, sharing a bottle of wine. The skyline of Manhattan glittered behind them. Another photo, taken through the window, showed them inside. The furniture was just as the receipt had suggested, sleek, modern, impersonal. It looked like a luxury hotel suite. Then came the documents. Harding had been thorough. The woman's name was Sienna Miller, an aspiring actress, according to her social media profiles, which were filled with glamorous headshots and posts about living her best life. She had a small role in a streaming series and a much larger role as Julian Blackwood's mistress. The affair Harding's report detailed had been going on for nearly a year. They had met at a fundraiser, one Isabella had been too ill with morning sickness to attend. The timeline was a knife to the gut. He had been with this woman while Isabella was struggling through the difficult first trimester of their pregnancy. The final pages were the financial documents, and they were the most damning. Julian had purchased the penthouse unit 25B 6 months ago. He had paid $4.8 million for it, in cash. A wire transfer from a private holding company he controlled, one that Isabella had never even heard of. And the deed, a crisp copy of which was included in the file, was in one name, only Julian Blackwood. Isabella stared at the name on the deed, and a strange, cold calm washed over her. He had been arrogant. He had been so sure of his own cleverness, so certain of her ignorance, that he hadn't even bothered to hide it under an LLC or a trust. He had put his own name on his secret. "He owns it outright," Harding said, reading her expression. "It's his asset. In a divorce, it would be considered marital property, of course, but for now, possession is in his name alone." Isabella looked at the photograph of Julian and Sienna laughing on the balcony of their multi-million-dollar love nest. They looked so happy, so untouchable in their glass tower. He had bought her a world away from his real life, a world where he could be free of his responsibilities, free of his pregnant wife. She thought of the nursery down the hall from her bedroom, filled with soft toys and the scent of fresh paint. She thought of the life she had been so excited to bring into this world, a life she now had to protect from the fallout of its father's deceit. "Mrs. Blackwood," Harding asked gently, "what do you want to do?" Isabella carefully placed the photos and documents back into the envelope. Her mind, once a whirlwind of pain and confusion, was now working with a chilling efficiency. The hurt was still there, a raw, gaping wound. But something else was growing over it, a diamond-hard resolve. He had used his money and power to build a world of lies. She would use that same power against him. She looked up at Harding, her eyes clear and dry. "Mr. Harding," she said, her voice steady, "I need a copy of that deed, and I need the name of the best, most aggressive real estate agent in Tribeca, someone who can move a high-end property fully furnished and ask no questions." Harding blinked, surprised. He had expected tears, a call to a divorce lawyer, a plan for a confrontation. This was something else entirely. "You're not going to confront him?" he asked. A slow, dangerous smile touched Isabella's lips. It was a smile Julian had never seen. "Oh, I'm going to confront him," she said softly. "But not yet. First, I'm going to redecorate." The days following her meeting with Harding were a masterclass in deception. Isabella became the perfect wife, a role she now played with the skill of a seasoned actress. She was attentive, affectionate, and never once mentioned Julian's late nights. She feigned excitement about the baby, discussed names with him over dinner, and even initiated intimacy, an act that felt like swallowing shards of glass, but was necessary for the illusion. She needed him complacent. She needed him unsuspecting. Julian, for his part, fell for it completely. He was relieved. Isabella's hormonal phase seemed to be over. She was back to being the beautiful, compliant partner he expected. The guilt that had occasionally pricked at his conscience was soothed, allowing him to enjoy his secret life with Sienna, with even less reservation. He saw Isabella's newfound calm, not as a warning sign, but as a victory. Meanwhile, Isabella's real life was happening in hushed phone calls and clandestine meetings. Armed with the copy of the deed and the name Harding had given her, a shark of a real estate agent named Penelope Vance, she began to set her plan in motion. Penelope was everything Isabella needed, chic-sharp and ravenously ambitious. She operated with a clinical lack of curiosity, her only concern being the commission. When Isabella, posing as an assistant to the Blackwood family, explained that Mr. Blackwood wanted to quietly lease one of his investment properties, Penelope didn't bat an eye. An off-market lease for a furnished penthouse at the Argent, Penelope had purred over the phone. "Consider it done." "What's the timeline?" "Immediate," Isabella said. "He wants a tenant by the end of the month, a 1-year lease. Price it aggressively. We want it moved, not sitting empty." The next hurdle was access. She had the key from his briefcase, but she needed to get inside without Julian knowing to allow Penelope to take photos for the private listing. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. "Darling," Julian announced one evening, "I have to fly to London for a few days, the final push on the merger. I'll be back Sunday night." It was the perfect window. "Oh, darling, that's a shame," Isabella said, her voice dripping with manufactured disappointment. "But I understand. We'll have the whole weekend to ourselves when you get back." The moment his car left for the airport on Thursday morning, her operation began. She called Penelope. "The apartment is free for the next 3 days. I need you there in an hour." Taking a car service, not her usual driver, downtown Isabella stood before the gleaming facade of the Argent. The building oozed a kind of sterile wealth that made her skin crawl. Inside the lobby was a cavern of white marble and brushed steel. She walked to the concierge desk, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. "Good morning," she said, her voice cool and authoritative. "I'm here for Unit 25B. Mr. Blackwood is out of the country and has sent me to meet with his realtor." She held up the key. The concierge, a man trained in the art of polite indifference, simply nodded and gestured towards the elevators. "Of course, ma'am. The elevator will take you directly to the unit." The ride up was silent and swift, a hermetically sealed tube ascending to the site of her husband's betrayal. When the doors opened, they opened directly into the apartment's private foyer. Isabella stepped out, and for the first time, saw the stage Julian had built for his affair. The place was exactly like the photos, yet infinitely worse in person. It was a monument to generic masculine taste. A massive grey sectional sofa, a black marble coffee table, abstract art on the walls that was bold but meaningless. It had all the personality of a luxury hotel's presidential suite. There was no warmth, no history, no love. It was a transaction. But the details were what truly twisted the knife. On a side table, 2 wine glasses, one with a faint lipstick stain. In the bathroom, a collection of expensive skincare products, none of them hers. And in the bedroom closet, hanging amongst several of Julian's suits, were a handful of dresses, silk and satin things that were far too small and far too flashy for Isabella's taste. On the nightstand, a framed photo of Julian and Sienna arms wrapped around each other on a yacht, smiling for the camera. A wave of nausea and rage washed over her so intensely she had to grip the doorframe for support. She wanted to scream. She wanted to take a baseball bat to the minimalist furniture, to shatter the floor-to-ceiling windows and let the screams of the city drown out the pain in her heart. But she didn't. She took a deep, shuddering breath, her hand going to her belly. "Not for you," she thought, a silent vow to her unborn son. "This mess will not be your inheritance." She walked over to the nightstand, picked up the framed photo, and slipped it into her purse. Evidence. Then she walked through the apartment, her mind a cold, calculating machine. She noted the brand of the champagne in the fridge, the expensive sheets on the bed, the general state of immaculate, soulless perfection. Penelope arrived, a whirlwind of efficiency and Chanel. She took in the apartment with a practiced eye. Stunning views. The furniture is high-end. This will lease in a heartbeat. While Penelope and her photographer went to work capturing the apartment in its best light for the private listing, Isabella did her own inventory. She found what she was looking for in a desk drawer. In the small office nook, a spare key fob and a guest parking pass for the building's garage. She slipped them into her purse along with the photo. "The listing will be circulated to my private client list by this afternoon," Penelope said as they were leaving. "Diplomats, tech executives, people who need a high-security pied-à-terre. We'll have offers by tomorrow." "Excellent," Isabella said. "Remember, the owner is very motivated." Over the next 2 days, Isabella was a knot of nervous energy. Julian called from London, his voice filled with the static of a long-distance call that she suspected was digitally faked. He told her he missed her. She told him she missed him too, the words feeling like poison on her tongue. Penelope, true to her word, was a miracle worker. By Friday afternoon, she had 3 offers, all at or above the asking price. One stood out. A young power couple, a surgeon, and her tech CEO husband had been staying at the Four Seasons for a month while waiting for their own brownstone to be renovated. They were desperate for a place, loved the apartment, and were willing to pay the entire year's lease up front. "They've been fully vetted," Penelope said. "Impeccable financials. They want to move in on Sunday." Sunday, the day Julian was due back from London. It was perfect. It was poetic. "Draw up the lease," Penelope Isabella said, a tremor of excitement in her voice. "Send it to me for Mr. Blackwood's signature. I have his power of attorney for real estate transactions." It was a lie, but a believable one. She had spent an hour with a scanner and a copy of Julian's signature from another document, perfecting a forgery that would pass muster. She signed the lease, sent it back to Penelope, and authorized the transfer of the tenant's massive payment into a new bank account she had opened in her own name that morning. The final piece of the puzzle was the logistics of the move-in itself. She couldn't risk the new tenants arriving while Julian was there. But what if he decided to spend one last night of his trip at the apartment on Sunday before coming home? The risk was enormous. But the potential reward, the image of his face when he realized what she had done, was too delicious to pass up. She had to orchestrate it perfectly. On Saturday evening, she sent Julian a text message. "Feeling a bit unwell. Doctor says I need to rest completely. Don't worry, Chloe is coming to stay with me. Just focus on your work and come home when you can. Love you." It was a calculated move. By telling him she was unwell, she garnered sympathy and ensured he wouldn't rush home. By mentioning Chloe, she provided a buffer, a reason for him not to call the house phone constantly. It was the perfect excuse for him to extend his business trip by one more night. He took the bait. A text came back almost immediately. "Oh no, darling. So sorry to hear. Rest up. I'll wrap things up here and be back Monday morning instead. Take care of yourself and our boy. All my love." Isabella read the text, a grim smile on her face. He wasn't in London. He was right here in the city 5 miles away, shacked up with his mistress. And by extending his stay, he had just walked willingly, eagerly into her trap. She called Penelope. "The move-in is a go for Sunday at noon. I will meet you there to hand over the keys and welcome the new tenants personally." The game was set. The pieces were in place. All she had to do was wait for the king to make his final, fatal move. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. For most of New York, it was a day for brunch and leisurely strolls in the park. For Isabella Blackwood, it was D-Day. She dressed with the care of a general preparing for battle, not in a power suit, but in a soft, cream-colored cashmere dress that emphasized her pregnancy. She wanted to look like the wronged wife, serene and untouchable, vulnerable yet powerful. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, her makeup minimal. The only jewelry she wore was her wedding ring. At 11:30, she arrived at the Argent and met Penelope in the lobby. The real estate agent was practically vibrating with excitement over the swift, lucrative deal. "Dr. Aris and Mr. Thorne are on their way up," Penelope whispered, handing Isabella a folder with the final paperwork. "Their movers are scheduled for 2 o'clock. They just want to do a final walkthrough and get the keys." "Perfect," Isabella said, her voice a calm island in the sea of her racing pulse. "I'll handle it from here, Penelope. You've been wonderful. Your commission will be wired tomorrow." Penelope, dismissed, but delighted, gave a crisp nod and saw herself out. Isabella was left alone in the marble lobby. She took a deep breath, placed a hand on her belly, and walked towards the elevators. This time, she didn't need a key. The concierge, recognizing her from her previous visit, simply smiled and pressed the button for the penthouse. The elevator ascended each floor, marking a tick of a clock, counting down to detonation. When the doors opened into the apartment's foyer, she was greeted by the low murmur of music and the sound of laughter. Her heart seized. They were here. Julian was here. She stepped into the living room. Julian and Sienna were on the couch, wrapped in plush white robes, empty champagne flutes on the coffee table beside a half-eaten platter of fruit. The Sunday newspaper was scattered on the floor. It was a picture of lazy domestic bliss, a grotesque parody of the life Isabella was supposed to be living. They hadn't heard her enter. Julian was whispering something in Sienna's ear, and she was giggling, her head thrown back. The sight was so intimate, so careless, that for a fleeting second, Isabella's resolve wavered. The raw pain of it threatened to overwhelm her. But then she felt a tiny kick, a little flutter from within, and the cold fury returned, solidifying her spine. She cleared her throat. "I hope I'm not interrupting." The laughter died instantly. Two heads whipped around. Julian's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning, panicked horror. He shot to his feet, clutching the robe closed. "Isabella, what are you doing here? I thought you were sick. I thought Chloe was with you." His voice was a strangled whisper. Sienna, wide-eyed, pulled the robe tighter around her small frame, looking from Julian to the very pregnant, very calm woman standing in the entryway. "Chloe is making tea at home," Isabella said, her voice even and impossibly calm. "And I was feeling much better, so I decided to handle some business for you. You know, since you're so busy in London." She let the word hang in the air, dripping with sarcasm. "Izzy, let me explain." He started, taking a step towards her, his hands held up in a placating gesture. "There's no need," Isabella said, cutting him off. She took a deliberate look around the apartment, her gaze lingering on the rumpled bed, visible through the open bedroom door. "You've made everything perfectly clear. This is a lovely place, Julian. A bit impersonal for my taste, but I can see the appeal. It's clean, minimalist." Just then, the elevator chimed and the doors opened again. A well-dressed couple in their late 30s stepped out, looking bright and excited. The woman, with sharp, intelligent eyes, stepped forward, her hand extended. "Hi, you must be the owner's assistant," she said warmly. "I'm Dr. Aris, and this is my husband, Ben Thorne. We are so thrilled with the apartment." The pictures didn't do it justice. Julian stared at them, his face ashen. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Sienna looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting between the newcomers and Julian. Isabella turned her back on her husband and gave the couple a brilliant smile. "Welcome," she said, shaking their hands. "I'm not the assistant, actually. I'm Isabella Blackwood. My husband, Julian, is the owner. I'm just here to make sure you have everything you need for a smooth move-in." She gestured towards Julian, who was frozen in a tableau of pure shock. "And this is my husband, Julian. He was just overseeing the final preparations." Ben Thorne, a friendly-looking man, grinned at Julian. "Mate, you've done a wonderful job. The place is immaculate. Thanks so much for letting us move in on such short notice. You're a lifesaver." Julian looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He stared at Isabella, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and terrified comprehension. The trap had not only been sprung, it had snapped shut with him right in the center. Dr. Aris's gaze flickered to Sienna, who was still huddled on the couch. The doctor's professional diagnostic eyes took in the white robe, the champagne flutes, and the general state of disarray. A look of dawning, awkward understanding crossed her face. "Oh," Dr. Aris said softly. "I see. We're interrupting something." Isabella's smile never wavered. "Not at all," she said, her voice like chimes of ice. "My husband's associate was just leaving." She turned her gaze to Sienna, a gaze so cold and dismissive it was like a physical slap. "Weren't you?" Sienna scrambled to her feet, grabbing a silk dress that was pulled on the floor. She looked at Julian, her eyes pleading for him to fix this, to do something. But Julian was paralyzed, utterly neutered by the sheer audacity of Isabella's move. He could do nothing. To protest would be to admit everything in front of these strangers, these new tenants who had a legally binding lease for his secret sanctuary. With a sob of pure humiliation, Sienna clutched her clothes to her chest and fled into the bedroom. A moment later, she emerged hastily dressed, her face blotchy with tears. Without a single look at anyone, she ran to the elevator and was gone. The silence she left behind was thick and suffocating. Ben and Dr. Aris looked deeply uncomfortable, staring at their shoes, the floor, anywhere but at the imploding domestic drama in front of them. Finally, Julian found his voice. It was a low, guttural growl. "Isabella, what have you done?" She turned to face him, the mask of politeness dropping to reveal the unyielding steel beneath. "I've secured a tenant for your investment property," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "A very lucrative one-year lease, paid in full up front. The money is already in an account. My account." She walked over to the coffee table and picked up one of the empty champagne flutes, holding it up to the light. "You bought this place with money from our family, you furnished it for your whore, and you lied to me every single day while I carry your son." She set the flute down with a sharp click. "You thought this was your secret world, your little escape. You were wrong. It was never yours. It was a marital asset, and I've just liquidated it." She turned back to the stunned tenants. "My deepest apologies for the untidiness," she said, her composure absolute. "My husband's previous guest left in a bit of a hurry. Here are the keys, the garage pass, and the concierge contact information. The movers can come up at 2. If you need anything at all, please call the real estate agent. My husband and I have some family matters to discuss." She gave them one last reassuring smile, then turned on her heel and walked towards the elevator, leaving Julian standing there, a king dethroned in his own castle, surrounded by the ruins of his secret life. He was trapped, not by walls or by locks, but by his own deceit, which his wife had so brilliantly and ruthlessly turned into a cage. As the elevator doors slid shut, the last thing Isabella saw was her husband's face, a mask of utter impotent rage and disbelief. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the faintest glimmer of a smile. Isabella didn't go home. She went straight to Chloe's Soho loft, the one place she knew she would be safe from the immediate storm. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation at the Argent began to ebb away, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. She collapsed onto Chloe's plush velvet sofa, the full weight of what she had done finally settling upon her. Chloe took one look at her face, wrapped her in a blanket, and placed a mug of chamomile tea in her hands without a word. She knew this was not the time for "I told you so." It was the time for silent solidarity. Isabella's phone began to light up almost immediately. A relentless barrage. First came the texts from Julian, a rapid-fire progression from confusion to fury. "Call me immediately. What the hell did you do, Isabella? You have no idea the mess you've made. This is insane. You can't do this. That lease isn't legal." Then the calls started. She watched his name flash on the screen again and again. She ignored them all, letting each call go to voicemail. The frantic buzzing of the phone on the coffee table was a strangely satisfying sound, the death rattle of her old life. After an hour of this, the voicemails began. The first was apoplectic. "Isabella, you have 5 minutes to call me and undo this mess before I call my lawyers and have you declared mentally incompetent. You've gone insane, do you hear me? Insane." The second an hour later was more pleading, the rage tempered by a dawning panic as the reality of his situation set in. Izzy, please, we need to talk. I know you're hurt. I know I messed up. But this is not the way. We can fix this. Just talk to me. She listened to them with a clinical detachment, her hand resting on her belly. This was the man she had promised to love for eternity, his voice now a desperate whine. She felt a pang of something, not pity, but a sad nostalgia for the man she thought he was. He's going to find you here, Chloe said, sipping her own tea. I know, Isabella replied, but I needed a few hours of peace before the next battle. As if on cue, a new text message appeared on her phone. It wasn't from Julian. It was from an unknown number. Is this Isabella Blackwood? This is Sienna Miller. I think you and I need to talk. I have some information you might find very useful. Isabella stared at the message, her blood running cold. Talk to her. The mistress. Her immediate reaction was revulsion, but curiosity and a deep-seated need to understand the full scope of Julian's betrayal won out. What could this woman possibly have to say? With trembling fingers, she typed back a single word, where the reply was instant. A coffee shop in the West Village, in an hour. You can't be serious, Chloe said, reading the exchange over her shoulder. It's a trap. She's probably there with him. No, Isabella said, her mind already working through the angles. He's too proud to use her as bait. And she's in survival mode. He's furious, and she knows she's disposable. Right now, she has no ally in the world, except potentially me. Against Chloe's strenuous objections, Isabella went. She chose a small table in the back of the bustling coffee shop, her back to the wall. Sienna arrived 10 minutes later, looking nothing like the glamorous creature in the photos. She was wearing sunglasses. Despite the dim lighting, her face pale and swollen from crying. She looked young, lost, and terrified. Thank you for coming, Sienna said, her voice barely a whisper as she slid into the opposite chair. I'm not here to make friends, Isabella said coldly. You have 5 minutes. Sienna flinched, but nodded. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But you need to know Julian is not the man you think he is, not just because of me. Go on, Isabella said, her interest piqued. He's in trouble, Sienna said, leaning forward and lowering her voice. Deep financial trouble. That merger with the Tokyo firm. It's not a merger. It's a bailout. The Blackwood shipping empire is leveraged to the hilt. He's been bleeding money for years, trying to keep up appearances. Isabella felt a jolt. Julian was the financial wizard, the Midas of Wall Street. The idea of him being in financial jeopardy seemed preposterous. Why should I believe you? Isabella asked. Because he told me everything, Sienna said, a bitter edge to her voice. In the beginning, he was just a rich, powerful man, but later, when he was scared, he would talk. He said his father ran the company into the ground with bad investments before he died, and Julian's been trying to plug the holes ever since. He said the public image of the Blackwood dynasty was all that was keeping his creditors at bay. The pieces began to click into place. Julian's desperation, his constant pressure, the need to maintain their flawless public facade. That apartment, Sienna continued, her eyes filling with tears again, that wasn't just some gift. He told me he bought it with the last of his personal liquid assets. He moved cash out of the company into a holding account so his board wouldn't see it. He called it his lifeboat, a place to hide assets if the whole company went under. He was planning to sell it for cash if things got really bad. She gave a choked, humorless laugh. And he put me in it. I was just part of the furniture. The revelation was staggering. Isabella's move, which she had intended as a deeply personal act of revenge, had inadvertently struck a critical blow to his financial survival plan. She hadn't just taken his love nest, she'd seized his emergency parachute. "He promised he would leave you," Sienna said quietly, looking down at her hands. "After the baby was born, he said it would be easier then, that he could paint you as an unstable postpartum mother and control the narrative. He was going to use the baby to secure a more favorable divorce settlement. That was it. That was the final unforgivable sin." The pain was so sharp, so visceral, it took Isabella's breath away. He was going to use their son against her. Isabella stood up her chair, scraping against the floor. "Thank you for the information, Sienna," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You were right. It was very useful." She left the coffee shop without a backward glance. The information didn't make her feel better. It didn't absolve Sienna, but it armed her. It transformed the battle from a personal war of the heart to a corporate takeover of her own life. When she got back to Chloe's loft, the doorman buzzed up. "Ma'am, Mr. Blackwood is here to see you." "Send him up," Isabella said, her voice like ice. The Julian, who stepped out of the elevator, was a man she had never seen before. His suit was rumpled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were wild with desperation. The powerful, controlled facade had been completely stripped away. "Isabella," he breathed, rushing towards her. "We have to fix this, now. You have to call those people, tell them it was a mistake, give them their money back." "No," she said simply. "No." "What do you mean, no?" he roared, his voice echoing in the loft. "That apartment is worth millions. It's my last. It's a critical asset." "It's a marital asset, Julian," she corrected him calmly. "An asset you hid from me. An asset I have now secured for the future of our son. Considering the precarious financial situation of Blackwood Shipping, I'd say it was a very prudent move." His face went slack with shock. How do you know about that?" "You have your secrets, and I have mine," she said. "I know about the lifeboat, Julian. I know about your plan to paint me as an unstable mother and use our child as a bargaining chip in our divorce." The color drained from his face. He was completely exposed, his lies and manipulations laid bare. "So here is what is going to happen," Isabella continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. "You are going to call your lawyer, not to fight me, but to accept my terms. You will agree to a quiet, swift divorce. I will get the brownstone a controlling interest in any assets not tied to the business, and a child support arrangement that will ensure our son is cared for the rest of his life. You will not fight me on custody. You will not speak my name to the press. In return, I will not leak the details of your financial insolvency or your disgusting little plan to the papers. I will allow you to try and save your crumbling empire without the added humiliation of this scandal." She paused, letting the terms sink in. "You have built a house of cards, Julian. I am giving you the choice to let it fall on its own, or to have me blow it down. Choose wisely." He stared at her, this woman he had so grievously underestimated. He saw not the emotional, pliable wife he thought he knew, but a strategist, a queen who had checkmated him in 3 moves. The fight went out of his eyes, replaced by the hollow look of defeat. "You've thought of everything," he whispered, his voice raspy. "I had to," she replied, her hand on her belly. "I'm a mother now." 6 months later, snow fell on the Upper East Side, muffling the city into a peaceful hush. From the window of the brownstone, now legally and spiritually all hers, Isabella watched the flakes drift down. The divorce had been exactly as she had dictated, swift, silent, and surgically precise. Faced with the complete implosion of his reputation, Julian had agreed to all her terms. His lawyers had postured, but Isabella's had only to mention financial misconduct and custody evaluation for their opposition to crumble. The news of the Blackwood separation was a brief flicker in the society pages, a masterpiece of fiction about two people amicably growing apart. The truth was far more dramatic. Blackwood shipping had collapsed. The Tokyo bailout became a hostile takeover, and Julian was ousted from his own company, his name forever tarnished. The papers had a field day with his professional failure, but the personal one that precipitated the fall remained Isabella's secret. She had kept her word. Isabella turned from the window and walked to the nursery. It was a haven of soft blues and creams. Her son Michael, christened not after any Blackwood, but her own beloved father, was 4 weeks old and sleeping peacefully. He was her anchor, the reason for her fight. A soft knock announced Chloe, her unwavering ally. "How's the little prince?" she whispered. "Sleeping like an angel." Isabella smiled. "And how's the deposed king?" Chloe rolled her eyes. "I ran into him yesterday. He looks deflated, like a cheap balloon a week after the party. He sold his cars, moved into a small apartment in a building without a doorman. The ultimate indignity." She paused. "He just looks quiet, like he finally has to listen to the silence he created." Isabella felt a strange sense of closure. Not joy at his misery, but the quiet confirmation she had made the right choice. Julian had come by a few weeks prior to sign the final papers and see Michael for the first time. He looked smaller, diminished, lost in the grandeur of the life he had thrown away. He had held his son awkwardly, looking at the tiny, perfect face with a bewildered expression. "He looks like you," he'd said quietly. "He has your eyes," Isabella had replied, not unkindly. Before he left, he had turned to her, his own eyes filled with a weary regret. "I was a fool, Izzy. I had everything and I didn't see it. I spent so much time building an empire on a foundation of lies that I forgot what a real foundation felt like." "A real foundation is built on trust, Julian," she said softly. "You can't buy it, and once it's broken, you can't just fix it." He had just nodded, the last of his arrogance finally gone. "I know that now. I'm sorry. For everything." It was the first genuine apology he had ever given her. It didn't change anything, but for Michael's sake, it was enough. Now standing in the quiet nursery, Isabella felt a profound sense of peace. The rage had burned itself out, leaving not a scar, but cleared ground. The pain had subsided into a memory, a reminder of the strength she didn't know she possessed. She had walked through fire not just for revenge, but for reclamation. She had reclaimed her life, her future, and her identity not as Mrs. Julian Blackwood, but as Isabella, mother of Michael, architect of her own new beginning. She looked down at her son, her true fortune, her real empire, and it was built on a foundation of love and strength, a foundation that would never crumble. Isabella's story is more than just revenge. It's a masterclass in reclaiming your power when you feel you have none. It shows that the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest wills, and that sometimes the most strategic move is the one nobody sees coming. She turned her pain into a plan, and her husband's secret asset into her greatest triumph, securing not just her own future, but that of her child. What did you think of her incredible, calculated move? Was it pure genius or a step too far? Would you have done the same in her position? We want to hear all of your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of strength drama and ultimate justice, please don't forget to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story of empowerment, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas. Your support helps us bring these powerful stories to you every week. Thank you for watching.